Hi everybody and welcome to the Kidney Coach YouTube channel. I am naturopath Fiona, co-founder of Kidney Coach and Kaigenesis, a range of supplements designed for people diagnosed with chronic kidney disease. I'm joined again today by the amazing, the wonderful, the fabulous Jessianna Saville. Jessianna is a renal dietitian. She heads up the team at Kidney Nutritional Institute. She's a regular to our podcast. I feel like you don't need a big introduction, Jess, because if anyone's been watching our podcast, they will have seen you before. But what I love about Jessianna and her entire team at KNI is they are really on the cutting edge of looking at the latest research and treating people as a person, not a disease, treating the cause, not the effect. They really work as what I would say functional renal dietitians. So really looking at drivers, checking for things like mold, genetics, all sorts of things that you wouldn't expect your traditional renal dietitian to do, which is why we love Jess and the team. So Jess, welcome. We've been working our way through the amino acids, and today we're doing probably one of the more well-known famous. Can you have a famous amino acid? Does this
I
happen?
don't know. This one's in everything. Yeah, it's gonna be fun to talk about.
It really is. And we just freaked each other out by just looking at some studies beforehand. And we're like, what have we missed? But it's okay. We will get to that. So we're talking about my good friend cysteine today. So Jessica, I'm going to hand it over to you. First off, tell me all things on a high level about cysteine and how it works in the body. And then we can get into the nitty-gritty of kidney disease.
So, okay, good question. Let's talk about cysteine. So, cysteine, if you're like, man, that sounds super familiar, you might have seen homocysteine on your labs, you might have heard of N-acetylcysteine, and it's actually quite permeates the kidney world in a lot of different areas. So, it's really interesting. Cysteine is kind of a really interesting amino acid. So, amino acids are these building blocks of protein. It's a sulfur containing amino acid, and it acts a lot of times more like a chemical switch than a building block, right? We think a lot of times of amino acids as these like building blocks. Cysteine's really interesting because it's this chemical switch that turns on the antioxidant systems. It drives detoxification. There's actually some great research on it helping regulate blood pressure and energy inside the kidney cells. The kidneys are the most cysteine rich organ in the body, which I think is really, really interesting.
So
But
interesting.
yeah, it's the conditionally essential amino acid, which means your body can make some of it. It makes it from methionine, but during stress, inflammation, or even kidney disease, sometimes you don't have enough production, and so you'd have to get more from food. So that's like in a summary, big picture. That's a couple things to know about cysteine.
Yeah, and I think the big takeaway that if people need to rehear it is that kidneys are the organ that are the most cysteine rich in the body. And talk to me about the link between, because you and I often talk about, so estimated glomerular filtration rate is like the hallmark test that everyone's looking at to test kidney function. And I don't know about you, Jessianna, but so many people are taking creatine now because of all the research coming out on creatine. And so I'm getting all these labs back where people's EGFRs look like they're in early stage 1 or stage 2 kidney failure. And I have to keep saying, are you taking creatine? And people are like, yes. I'm like, you need to stop creatine for 2 weeks and we need to redo your kidney function because we're using creatine in a calculation. If you're taking a lot of creatine, it'll boost creatinine. That's what's used in these ratios. What I really like is Cystatin C as a marker because it looks like it's more accurate, especially if you work out or take things like creatine or if you have a lot of muscle mass, which can throw this whole creatinine EGFR ratio out. So tell me about the link between Cystatin C and cysteine, because that is our other big marker looking at kidney function.
Yeah, no, I think this is a really important piece. Now, when I learned that the kidneys are the most important or like most rich, like organ most rich in cysteine, I was like, huh, I wonder if that links back to cystatin C. And they both are start with CYS, right? And I was like, are these linked? And
Mm.
for sure they are. So cystatin C, which is, we are seeing it in all the recent guidelines as a very important diagnostic lab marker. So this, I mean, Cystatin C is not a new lab. It's just more recently in all the guidelines, they recommend not just using GFR creatinine, but they recommend using Cystatin C. So Cystatin C is freely filtered by the glomerulus and is almost completely reabsorbed by the tubules. It's a protein that inhibits enzymes called cysteine proteases. So cystatin C, and remember, the kidneys are very rich in cysteine. So cystatin C is linked into these cysteine proteases. It's the levels of cystatin C will rise when filtration slows. And so that makes it a sensitive marker for GFR that isn't skewed by muscle mass or gender, because again, it's filtered by the kidneys. That biochemically, the cystatin C and the cysteine are connected because one, again, like these are like complex pathways. So like, how do I explain this very simply?
Sorry.
So cystatin C fuels these cysteine-based enzymes, and the cysteine-based enzymes also keep cystatin C in check. So they kind of have this, this very integrated relationship. Ultimately, what does that mean for a patient? Like, why do you care? The only thing that really, really matters here is that cystatin C is a better measure, a good foundational measure to keep tabs on your kidney function. That is one thing I'd say 100%. I have almost all my patients get a cystatin C level whenever possible. I just think it's such a better marker to give like a whole picture of what's going on with filtration. When it comes to cysteine, like do you add cysteine, take away cysteine, linked back to cystatin C, I'm not a huge fan for the most part of supplementing with a single amino acid, though we will talk a little bit about where cysteine shows up as a supplement, a form of it. So it doesn't really matter so much on a cystatin C basis, but they are linked for sure because cysteine is just so, so rich in the kidneys.
Thank you. That's a good explanation. I just wanted to put that together for people. And then let's stay high level before we start to do a deep dive on supplementations and things like that. Cysteine, you said the body can make a little bit itself. If someone was wanting to increase a little bit of cysteine in their diet, what are some naturally foods that are high in cysteine that are going to contribute to this amino acid?
Perfect. So cysteine is primarily found in your protein foods. So if you are including some animal protein, so in the kidney world, a lot of people move towards a plant-based diet. You can still get plenty of cysteine from that, from whole grains, legumes, etc. Um, but it's also found in meat. So whenever we talk about these amino acids, and if you've ever watched Lindsay Zerker, she's been on this podcast before, her and I are really, really huge advocates of being well nourished. There's so much focus on restriction in kidney disease. Okay, take out the protein. Okay, take out the potassium. Okay, take all these things out because the kidneys can't filter them. And what we see more often than not is people become overall like malnourished on this subclinical level. And that doesn't do any favors. So if we're thinking about cysteine, right? The kidneys are very rich in cysteine. It's a precursor for detoxification. It helps with as an antioxidant. You really, if you're cutting your protein down super low and it's not an appropriate amount for your body, or if you're cutting it very low and not adding on an amino acid like a keto analog, you really can be robbing Peter to pay Paul because you're going to have those amino acids to help with these biochemical reactions, these antioxidant reactions. It's going to be very, very important. So whenever you tend towards like, okay, I'm gonna like super restrict my diet, bring my protein down super low, just make sure that you're not only eating vegetables because cysteine is going to be found in like the legumes and the nuts and the whole grains, in as well as some of the animal proteins. So if you go too far one way, it's never, never good.
No, thank you. And then now you've mentioned it a few times, let's dig into some of the big roles that cysteine play in the body. You've mentioned antioxidants a few times. So let's walk me through that. Why is cysteine so important? And then we can start talking about how we supplement it because that is such a rabbit hole.
Okay. Oh, yeah. There's so many different things. Okay. So cysteine, there's kind of four big areas that we look at, but two, I don't know, maybe three, I would say that I really think about with the kidney. So number one, we have antioxidant defense. So it's a rate limiting ingredient for making glutathione. So glutathione is super important. It's the most abundant antioxidant in your body. When there is kidney disease, there is going to be oxidative stress. One of the studies I read, they looked at specifically does uremia, which is like when the toxins build up from very reduced kidney function, does uremia cause oxidative stress? Like just uremia in and of itself, and it's true. So you do need to have enough antioxidants in your body. If you get like way too many, so if your body's just like crazy making like tons and tons of antioxidants, so if you don't have this rate limiting ingredient, this cysteine, then you kind of tip to the other side of being on this redox side, which makes so the cells can't really function very well. Um, Another thing is that cysteine contributes to making coenzyme A and taurine, which are really important for your mitochondrial function and detox. So when I think of cysteine, I really start going to antioxidants and detoxification. Like
Mhm.
these two places, cysteine is very helpful for. Um, it also is helpful because it is, again, an amino acid with a sulfur group attached to it, and that allows it to be a redox sensor. So it turns on or off some of the stress response pathways also. I stress in the kidneys is like such a big deal. And not just like daily stress, like you're caught in traffic or someone cuts you off, whatever. Yes, of course, that kind of stress. But like the body itself being under stress because there's inflammation, or the body being under stress because it's dealing with, blood pressures that's spiking all the time or whatever, right? The body being out of balance means that it's going to be stressed. You really need that sulfur group that cysteine brings to the table to help kind of calm down that stress response pathway.
Yeah, for sure. And I think I'd add to that the other two little things, not to the as degree that you've just spoken about those actions there, but metal chelation, so mercury and cadmium is
Mm.
hence
Oh, good point. Yeah.
that. Yeah, and then it modulates inflammation. And the other big one that I always think about it is proteinuria and fibrosis. And we'll talk about NAC in a minute, but cysteine derivatives seem to downregulate that tumor growth factor 1 beta, I think I said before, and collagen 4 and alpha SMA, which reduces renal fibrosis. And as you and I know, like renal fibrosis is like the end stage, or when we start to really see kidney function decline because the tissues are becoming fibrotic. So cysteine does play a role in that, but that was quite specific to supplementing something called N-acetylcysteine. So I'm going to lead on to that unless you feel like there's something we need to add before we head into the realms of what people might have heard of, things like N-acetylcysteine. So talk to me about, because we're now moving into the supplementational side. So walk me
Yes.
through that, because you and I went down some big rabbit holes and some studies before this about
There's some interesting
NC.
stuff about it. I was like, oh no, I'm done. So N-acetylcysteine is kind of a darling in the like holistic functional world because it is used in so many different pathways.
Mm.
It really is an amazing supplement, right? It's kind of the supplemental form of cysteine that is used. Um, it's not like a powder scoop. Usually it comes in a tablet. Sometimes you can have a liposomal one as well. A lot of times it's combined with your B vitamins because they're used in a bunch of different pathways that cysteine is as well. Um, in the world of kidney disease, you'll see it show up. You see NAC show up all over the place, but one place that's really interesting is on contrast induced nephropathy prevention. So sometimes if you have to go get a CAT scan, or they're going to give you contrast, so they can actually do the imaging. Some people, that contrast is very, very nephrotoxic. And there are some studies where you do NAC before and after getting that procedure to help reduce the impact of that toxic contrast, because the kidneys do have to help with filtering that out and getting rid of it.
Yeah.
So I have seen NAC in the research frequently there. I think is a really, really important piece to look at. Otherwise, when, at least for us, when I'm looking at a patient, what I've always done historically, when I'm looking at a patient and say, oh, kind of thinking through what is root cause or some driving factors, is like inflammation a huge piece? Like sometimes you just see kind of a cluster of symptoms going on, like a blood pressure that's really hard to control, and then maybe people are having um, issues, whether it's with like aches and pains or whatever, but you can just tell that they have a definitive like inflammation going on. It's sometimes really hard for me to put my finger on it because you can't always see it in regular labs very well. It's just like people overall talking about not feeling great. You know that there's some inflammation. NAC sometimes can be a really, really simple, inexpensive way to help people start replenishing glutathione and reducing oxidative stress. Um, so I think that's one way that we use it quite a bit. And I have quite a few people that are on it. I know it's in your products as well.
Yeah.
Some of the reviews that I read, they said, like when they look through NAC in the kidneys, they say, hey, they don't see any risk for it. And they see tons of benefit from improving blood pressure to, um, protecting the kidneys. And I can't remember, there's one other thing that they pointed out in particular. And so, after looking at tons and tons of studies, these researchers concluded, this was in 2021, the review that I looked at, that, N-acetylcysteine is like a really solid supplement that you could use with the kidneys.
Yeah, it's in our kidney advance for that reason. When we looked through it all, it was one that had very good safety data on it, and that
Yeah.
seems to, because of the protein in urea and the decreased inflammation, the fibrotic aspect, I was like, that one's a no-brainer. But then we studied upon a study done in mice.
Yeah. Okay, so this is why when you look at the research for any disease, and especially with kidneys, where like everyone is like really, and like, to be fair, like for a good reason, like really worried that anything is going to cause problems to their kidneys, like anything. So one of the studies I looked at, that what they did is they had these mice, and they had perfusion induced kidney disease, and this ischemia perfusion induced kidney disease. And initially, and then they gave these mice NAC. Initially, they're like, hey, this is really helping the mice. And the researchers thought, like, this is going to help them really long term. So after like 3 days or so, mice don't live forever. They're like, wow, this is like really working. Then they looked at them 3 weeks later, and actually what they saw with the NAC is that the mice that got the NAC, they were doing worse, which I was like, what? This can't be right. Like they had like more fibrosis, more oxidative stress, like more like overall issues, and their kidney function was declining. So the title of the study is like, like NAC. I can't remember what it was. I have to go pull it up again. But basically it's like it's not helpful in a chronic disease state. And it's like that's not consistent with what I've read, understood, totally blown away. But then Fiona, especially, she's like, no, 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 we got to go look at the dosage. And they were giving them, what did you say? Like,
They were giving them the equivalent of um, 25 to 71 grams a day. Now, regular human dose is 600 milligrams to 1.2 gram max. That's where you would generally prescribe it. So 20 to 70 to 100 times over the standard human dose. So my mild freak out disappeared because I'm like, we're never ever going to dose anyone that way. But it's interesting. That's why you have to go and check all of this stuff about the studies. But interestingly, in massive dose, and you probably understand this better than I do, is you get a blunting of the body's ability to make its own glutathione, and you get a down regulation. So anything, you know, that beautiful bell curve analogy that you used before we hit record, anything is dose dependent, anything can become toxic. But yeah, we're never going to dose humans anywhere near that. So if you are taking N-acetylcysteine, please don't take 25 to 70 grams a day is the short answer.
This would be like you take like literally the whole bottle in like one dosage. But I
Yes.
do think one of the things that is a good takeaway from that, again, is that number one, like when you read the research, especially on supplements for kidney disease, a lot of times the negative research on them is because they use these like crazy doses that are
Mhm.
not consistent with what humans would do. And a lot of the research on supplements for kidney disease are done in animals because there's just not a lot of money to do a lot of clinical trials for supplements.
Yes.
But
Yes.
so that's one thing I think that's a really important takeaway. The other thing that I think is a really important takeaway, and I do see this in the kidney world, is some people say, well, if a little bit is good, then a lot is better. And that is never true for the human body. There are very few instances where you want to, like, again, the bell curve is like too little doesn't really do anything. Too much is going to do something bad. And in the middle is like the sweet spot where you're going to start getting some clinical impact. Um, there are very few instances where if you push the body totally out of balance, that it's going to spring back and actually be in a better place. So in general, I really feel strongly that if you're going to take a supplement, number one, be aware of the correct dose because too little is just going to waste your money and too much is going to be a problem. It's most supplements can be like really hard to take way too many unless you like love vitamin D gummies and you like eat them all the time. But most of them it's pretty hard to take too much even if you're just following the recommendations on the supplement bottle. Usually that's a fairly conservative dose. Sometimes a really smart clinician will have you take a little bit extra for whatever reason. But the other thing is that if like oxidative stress isn't your issue, maybe your kidney function's a lot higher, 60, 65, 70%, then to me I also think, well, maybe instead of taking NAC, which can, if you have a lot already in your system, that would make sense that it would cause some blunting of your body's own ability to make it. Maybe just work on a different pathway to support yourself.
Yeah.
And food's a like safe way to do that.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's, yeah, I just found that so interesting. But like you say, like too much of anything, like anything can be poisonous depending on dosage range. And I think to your point, and it was interesting that this study then concluded that N-acetylcysteine probably wasn't good. And I'm like, that's ridiculous. No one's going to dose at that. And I feel like and you were saying this before, a lot of studies done in mice are using dosages that we just never use clinically. So I think it's really important that if your nephrologist or your GP or specialist is saying, look, herbs are dangerous, it's like, well, number one, show me the study, and then number two, what dosages were they using? Are they in range? And kidneys are sensitive little things. It's why we use actually N-acetylcysteine in things like contrast dye and things like that, because it stops the damage to kidneys. But they are your filtration unit, and so they have to take all the toxins out. So any mass doses of anything potentially can be harmful to the very sensitive tissues that are in the kidneys. And so I think that study was really a great reminder of that, and also to make sure you go and do the digging of all of that. But yeah, well, I did have a brief heart attack when we first looked at it.
I
So
did too. Like I was like pulling this study through. I was like, I gotta talk to Fiona about this because maybe this is, and it wasn't like an old study. It was like
you
2022.
were,
But I was like, I missed something like big along the way, and I was like, maybe. And I do like there are sometimes, to be fair, also in the kidney world, things always evolve, and sometimes we do learn things that I'm like, oh, I didn't that's a new development or new way to think about
Mhm.
it. If we had all the information about the kidneys and when people came in, we'd say like, hey, let's diagnose and then let's figure out your root cause and then here's your treatment and then everyone would get better. I do think there are enough tools out there for everyone to improve their kidney function. I think we haven't probably put all together in a way that can be managed over a huge populace, but there are a lot of like amazing tools out there. And there are things that, over time as a clinician, the more you work with people, you do change your mind about some things. You see, oh, that didn't work like I thought it would. Oh, this worked and I wasn't expecting that. And so you modify. So
I think that's a sign of a good clinician. You're always taking in the new feedback and adjusting and not getting stuck on stuff. It's, Lindsay and I talk about it all the time. It's the ability to be curious. I
yes,
think
you have to be curious.
yeah, absolutely have to. All right, Jessianna, anything else you want to add about cysteine?
Um, I don't think so necessarily. I think that if there's a takeaway as a patient, there's a couple things. So number one, you do want to have cysteine in your body. So don't eat a no protein diet. You do need protein. Like on these amino acids, I still love to bring it back to protein, like too much protein, not great for everyone, but too little is also not good. So you still need protein in your diet. If you're not sure how much protein, what that looks like, that's why you can work with a professional. You work with someone on Kidney Coach's team, work with someone on our team, and we can really help gear into what the right amount of protein is for you. So that'd be one takeaway for me. The second one, which is like kind of linked to cysteine, kind of not, because they're connected, but there's not really an action item. Is get a cystatin C level would be another huge takeaway, and then the third takeaway I think is that N-acetylcysteine can be a hugely helpful supplement to look at for kidney disease, and that there are quite a few studies that show that it's safe. I really don't see tons of places that it reacts with medications, and that it can benefit kidney function and inflammation and reduce oxidative stress, which can be pretty pretty dominant in the kidney world.
Yeah, I think N-acetylcysteine is quite an important one because of all the dry things that we know that drive kidney disease, being fibrosis, oxidative damage, inflammation, and N-acetylcysteine as a supplement actually pulls down on all of those, and heavy metals as well, as we know. Yeah, so I think it's a good supplement to look at, but if, like you mentioned earlier, if you've got good kidney function and you're sitting, in the 60s to 70s, it might just be getting it through food sources where you're not so limited on, maybe you have a little bit of animal protein and things like that in there, and supporting your antioxidants through your green leafies and polyphenols through your nice coloured berries and things like that, instead of having to supplement it and working on other things. So yeah, all right. Well, I'm glad N-acetylcysteine gets a tick of approval in its ability to use in kidney disease. And cysteine is, one of these more robustly studied amino acids in its function and how it ties into kidney disease more so than some of the other ones we've spoken about. Jessianna, as always, it's a pleasure. If anyone's out there thinking, oh, I really need some specific support with that, I'll put in the details to Kidney Nutritional Institute down below. You've got Jessianna and Lindsay and a full team there of really highly skilled renal dietitians that won't just give you a renal diet and say, go along your merry way. They're going to do all the functional testing and look at all of that sort of stuff. That's how they work, which is fabulous. If you want to know more about what we do, head to www.kidneycoach.com. You'll also find us all our socials as well. Kay and I have got a great Instagram page as well that you can follow there. So I'll put in all the links there. And you guys have got a Facebook page too, and heaps of free resources on your website. I should mention that if you're looking for diets and all of those sort of things.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely Kay and I have got some really great info there. Jessianna, thank you so much. We'll be back to talk about what I feel like we haven't done taurine yet, and I feel like someone actually put in the comments, please talk about taurine. So
okay, so next month has to be taurine then.
All right, done. Taurine will be next.
It'll be fun. Yeah, taurine's a cool amino acid.
Yeah, it's another one I use a lot of and has a lot of research in kidney disease. So we will talk about taurine. All right, thank you for being part of our community and watching. Please, if you've got any questions or comments, leave them below, and we'll see you all next time. Thanks again, Jessianna. Bye.
Okay, bye.